Van is just going to get our slides up and then we'll kick off. Okay, great. So I'm going to kick us off. For those of you who I've not met before, I'm Lisa Valerio and I'm the founder of the Fenixia Foundation, and it's a nonprofit that I started 4 years ago with Lonnie Hessen, who's my co-founder, who will be presenting to you this evening along with Vanessa. And we started the nonprofit to be able to bring resources to families with special needs. And, you know, we had always had the vision to be able to do webinars and had just started talking about them. And the COVID crisis has happened. So we realized that we were going to speed that up a little bit and start to be able to provide resources, you know, outside of just not in person through doing, you know, workshops in person or doing trainings and outreaches. We've done a lot of work over the last 4 years in the Philippines, and doing quite a bit of work here in the Bay Area where Lonnie and I both live, and have been fortunate enough last year actually to go back to the Philippines 3 times and to be able to do quite a bit of outreach in partnership with Vanessa and many other folks that we have partnered with and doctors. So with that, I'm gonna watch the chat while both Vanessa and Lonnie are presenting to you tonight, but we would love for all of you, if you have questions, feel free. There's a Q&A here in the webinar that you can ask questions on. And then also in the chat, you can also do that. And then we're gonna try to leave 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. I'm going to try to keep Lonnie and Vanessa just sort of on schedule with that. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lonnie. Are we good? And Lonnie needs to go off mute, so I wonder if I have to unmute. You're good? Okay. Anyway, enjoy the webinar, everyone.
Great. Hi, everyone. I am Lonnie Hessen, and as Lisa mentioned, co-founder of the Fenixia Foundation, and also an occupational therapist and colleague of Vanessa's. We are both occupational therapists. I've been working with families with kids with special needs since 1999, so age myself a little there. And I'm very happy to be presenting with Vanessa this afternoon, your time, and this evening, my time, about sensory processing, sensory needs in kids, both with special needs and just nourishing your child's sensory needs in general. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about how the sensory needs apply to kids, who have sort of special learning needs, as well as just our bodies in general. Because we all have sensory processing as part of our nervous system. That's how we take information in from the world. So let's start from that point. So given that statement, right, what is sensory integration and how do we nourish our child's sensory needs? Sensory processing is really how we take information in from the environment and how our nervous system receives that information. And in turn, the nervous system turns that into appropriate motor and behavioral responses. Go ahead to the next slide, Vanessa. Thanks. So when we talk about sensory needs, we're thinking about our senses, the ones that you learned when you were a kid in school, right? Those basic senses of sight and hearing, taste, touch, and smell. But there are some senses that you might not be as familiar with that are the ones that really move our body and how our body respond to incoming information. So the proprioceptive sense and the vestibular sense and the interoceptive sense. So those are words that are usually not among the words that we learn when we're, in elementary school about our 5 basic senses. We don't usually hear the word vestibular or proprioceptive or interoceptive. So we're going to talk about those senses in a little more depth in the next few slides. But just to review, right, sight is the information that we take in with our eyes. We process what we see through our eyes and sight. Smell, of course, is fairly self-explanatory information we take in from things we smell around us, hearing in our ears, and taste and touch. And then again, that vestibular, proprioceptive, and interoceptive sense. So let's talk a little bit more about those other senses that you might not know so much about. All right, so really what these other senses are about is our body. So we have something called the vestibular system. And the vestibular system is located behind the temporal bone, which is here, right behind your ear. And it is responsible for our equilibrium. So it's how we maintain our balance. It's responsible to keep us upright. It's responsible for tracking the movement of the body in relationship to the head. So it's really nice. These visuals are terrific that are on this slide, right? So we have, kids love to do things like, balance on the edge of a curb. Kids love to, turn their bodies upside down and spin their bodies around and really play with motion. And the reason that that's fun and exciting for kids is because it activates that vestibular sense and it gives us an idea about where our body is in space. So it's a really important sense for developing movement, developing our sense of body in space. And it's a really important sense for safety because it keeps us, again, upright. It's responsible for our upright equilibrium, and it's responsible for us, being able to turn our head, look at something and not fall over. It's pretty important sense. So that's the vestibular sense, responsible for balance and motion. So what happens if that vestibular sense is a little bit off, right? What happens if we have a hypersensitive? And when we say hypersensitive, what we mean is that any system in our body can over-respond to information that's incoming to the system. So hypersensitivity means that you are having a response that is overly excitatory, essentially. So we may have someone who feels fearful to explore those ordinary movement activities. So if you have a little kiddo who doesn't like the swings or is afraid of going down a slide or doesn't like to climb up high, those are fearful reactions to movements that we would expect for a child to be excited to explore and excited to think about trying. We may see kids be apprehensive about walking or crawling on a surface that is not even, that is unstable, right? So both Vanessa and I work a lot in a sensory motor gym environment. And in those environments, we have like crash pads and bumpy pillows and obstacle courses for kids to walk and crawl over. And those surfaces in, an OT gym setting are not always stable or even. And if we see children having a hard time navigating those surfaces, we might think, wonder what's happening in that vestibular sense. Kids who have are feeling a little off about that vestibular system may be also, can you go back one more, Van? Sorry. There we go. Might seem fearful in like a wide open space, right? So they may need more sort of touch points around them to maintain that feeling of security and body in space. And they also might just appear kind of clumsy and they want their feet on the ground. They don't want those feet to be picked up off the ground. So when we're talking about children with hypersensitive systems in any of our systems, we want to help to gently introduce these experiences and support kids so that they become comfortable. So forcing a child to do something, if they're having a hypersensitive sensory response, is going to have the opposite effect of what you want it to have. So gentle experiences and support as you get them used to moving their bodies. Okay. All right. So again, we talked about hypersensitive. We also might have hyposensitivity, and that means that the system in question isn't responding as it should to the amount of input it's being given, right? So it should be that when we tip our head upside down to do a somersault, we might get a little bit dizzy, but not so dizzy that we can't tolerate it and that we become sick or we become, too dizzy and fall over. A hyposensitive system is going to really propel a child to seek that movement type, to seek that vestibular system stimulation by doing more and more and more of the activities that get that system moving. So we're going to see kids who twirl and jump and spin and maybe pace a room and, you know, maybe spin objects, spin their, become over excited by these types of movement activities because they don't really know when to stop. They know that they need it. They know that their body needs these experiences, but they're not sure when to stop. And therefore you see a kid who might become, you know, go from a calm, you know, happy kid, does a little bit of vestibular movement and becomes so excited. And it might look like what we think of as kind of hyperactivity, overactivity, right? So what we need to do with kids that have this sort of hyposensitivity is give those excuse me, it is 11. So if I trip over my tongue a couple of times, just a little tired. So what we need to do with these kiddos is to give them the amount of vestibular activity that's sort of a just right challenge. And we need to provide heavy work, which we'll talk about in a second, to mitigate a little bit of that vestibular input. So what we'll need to do is give them basically an end to those movement activities so that they can keep their self-regulation intact. So you can think to yourself, you know, is my child, you know, showing the behaviors that we just talked about in the previous slide? Okay, so the vestibular system we just went over, and now we're moving to another sensory processing system in our body called the proprioceptive system. The proprioceptive system is information that comes in basically through our joints and muscles. So in every joint of our body, our wrists and our elbows and our shoulders and our necks, all of the joints of our body, they have these little receptors in them called muscle spindles. And those muscle spindles are responsible for sensing the rate of change of stretch. So basically, how much is my muscle moving in relationship to where my joint is attached to my body? So it gives us information about pressure coming in and out of our body. It gives us an idea about how hard we might throw a ball, or how hard we might hug another friend, or how, you know, tightly we might squeeze a pencil. So you can see some of these examples, pushing and pulling, and lifting heavy objects, and isometric movements that you do, meaning held isometric movements, like if you're going to hold like a plank position in an exercise class or something like that. That's proprioception. And proprioception is also a really, really important way for our body to get information about where we are in space. It gives us boundaries and edges. So if the proprioceptive system is a little bit off, we may have a hard time understanding those boundaries and edges, and we might have a tendency to fall and be kind of clumsy. We might have a hard time maintaining our posture, right? So if our proprioceptive system is not intact, we might have difficulty with posture. We might have, you know, a more slumped or low tone sort of posture. We may have a higher tone sort of posture if the proprioceptive system is off. We might have difficulty with like manipulation of small objects because we don't really know how much pressure to put into our fingers to like button something or snap something or pull a zipper. Handwriting comes into play here. Again, in the previous slide, we mentioned that proprioception might give us information about how tightly we squeeze a pencil. So if we don't really know how to squeeze that pencil, we're squeezing it too tightly or too lightly, handwriting can become difficult. And then, you know, another good point here is that we may see self-feeding problems, right? It's hard to hold the spoon and get the spoon to the mouth because we're having a hard time with that idea of rate of change of stretch of the arm from hand to mouth. And we also may resist new motor activities in the when the proprioceptive system is a little off. And is my child, these are questions you just ask yourself, right? You ask yourself, is this something I'm noticing or observing with my child? And if so, we're going to tell you a little bit more about how we can help, okay? So the interoceptive system is this idea of the internal body sensations. And I love this cute little internal organs graphic here. So we get internal sensations from our body all day long, right? When we're hungry, we know we're hungry because of an interoceptive sense. We know that we might feel tired. We know when we feel sick. We know when something hurts us. And we have an awareness of bodily functions, like if we need to use the bathroom and that sort of thing. So the interoceptive system are those internal sensations that give us signals that we might seek out the need to eat. We might seek out the need to use the bathroom, right? So that is our interoceptive sense. And for kids who have trouble with this sense, you may notice that, a child who doesn't really feel hungry or says so, like, oh no, I'm not hungry right now. I'm not hungry right now. They are kids that you explicitly need to sort of teach about, you might not feel your body being hungry, but I'm noticing that you're really tired right now. And I know that you haven't had a snack in 4 hours. So you need to give kids a little bit more external explanation and help them to do body scans, right? So, if a child is having some difficulty with interoceptive sensations, you might have them do body scans to help them understand, like, if your heart is beating really fast, that might mean, right, that you're feeling something not quite right. So help them to really start to tune in to those inner bodily function sensations by doing those body scans.
Hey, Lonnie, we have a question I think that I think is relevant here. I'm going to read it. It says, hi, how does the different reflex integration like spinal paras, ATNR and STNR help those who are hypersensitive as well as those who are hyposensitive? And is there any chance that these two concepts, hypersensitive and hyposensitive, goes together?
Oh, in one system? Yeah, you can definitely be hypersensitive or hyposensitive in different systems of the body. And I'm not 100% sure I'm understanding if that's answering the question. I think so. So you may be hypersensitive to any sense in your body, right? You might be hypersensitive to light, but hyposensitive to taste, for example. Or you might be hypersensitive to vestibular input, but hyposensitive to proprioceptive input. And in terms of the reflex integration, that's a really good question. It's also a really long question to answer. So what I think we could do in this case for the reflex integration is to send some resources to help to answer that question, because otherwise we won't stay on time.
Okay, wonderful, thank you.
For a really long time, so it's a whole nother webinar, Van. So yeah, so we can send some resources about the reflex integration piece. Okay, so let's go back and take a look at the tactile system. And I think this is a really great idea because the tactile system is really, really highly linked to our proprioceptive system for sure. And it is a really big system for both sort of unconscious, more reflexive type responses, as well as conscious, more kind of cognitive processing. So in terms of the tactile system, again, what we're thinking about with tactile is touch, right? So anything those are synonyms. The word tactile and the word touch are synonymous with one another. And it really does, the tactile system is huge in terms of our protective system. So if I'm hanging out here at home and I don't expect that somebody's going to come up behind me and lightly tap me on the shoulder, that is going to activate something called our fight, fright, or well, yeah, I say it differently, but okay. Fight, fright, or flight, or fight, fright, or freeze can also be in there as well. So that is a protective system that we need in order to keep our bodies safe. And the tactile system is responsible for processing that. So yeah, if somebody came up behind me right now and tapped me on the shoulder and I wasn't expecting it, I would do something involuntary, right? I would go, what? Right? And it brings up my posture and it brings up that ability to do what I need to do next. So we're born with this system. It's a primal system, and that does go back to reflex integration. So we can send you some more information on the reflexes. Again, stimulated by light touch, right? Light touch is not necessarily regulating. It's more like activating and potentially just regulating than heavy touch. And it's processed through our emotional limbic system in excitatory system. And it's not cognitive, right? So if somebody comes and taps me on the shoulder and I am not expecting it, I don't think, oh, I should sit up really fast and turn around and look. I don't think that in my mind. I just do it. It's reflexive. So our discriminative pressure touch system, right? So this is the more kind of cognitive processing part of our tactile system, is that deep touch, pressure, and vibration. And it tends to be more soothing. It tends to be more regulating. It tends to be more calming. And it activates that parasympathetic system. It calms and organizes our body, and it can allow for more alert cognitive responsiveness. So when you go to maybe prompt a child who's working on a task at home, maybe you're doing some, learning activities at home, and you want to get their attention, but you want to get their attention in a way that's going to activate a cognitive response. You want to use a nice heavy pressure to cue them instead of a light touch, right? So that light touch might do something that activates a nervous system response versus a heavy, calmer touch that can help to prompt that child more cognitively. And it does, it promotes and helps us to learn and think through what we're doing. All right. Okay, so if we, with this second look at the tactile system, if we're thinking that there might be, something problematic here, we might notice some behaviors or some tendencies, and those are listed here. So again, the tactile system, it pertains to the sense of touch. It might alert us to danger. It helps give our body boundaries. And we might notice things like distractibility or hyperactivity if we have some tactile system dysfunction. We may notice, again, that we're over or undersensitive. That's, again, hyper or hyposensitive. And we might see things like hypervigilance, right? If we don't expect to be touched, or if we're like, this is a great example of this, is like a kid who doesn't like to stand in the middle of the line when they're walking to and from class because they don't want a kid to touch them unexpectedly, because it always sends them into that fight, flight, or freeze response. So that's hypervigilance, right? I'm just always paying attention, and I might have a bad response. They may have inappropriate pain sensation because that pain and temperature pathway and that tactile pathway, they're all interconnected in that body. We may avoid getting our hands dirty because we might not like that sensation. And we may have difficulty with clothing textures, seams, tags. So kids that, really have a hard time with tolerating different types of clothing. We may be picky eaters because we may not like the texture or feeling of certain types of textures in our mouths. That's also tactile. We may, avoid using our whole hand for things. We might only touch things with our little one finger, and we're not sure about it. And we may be intolerant of things that are supposed to be supportive. Like we might be intolerant of wearing glasses, or we may be intolerant of, wearing hearing aids, because those are tricky to handle in terms of the feeling of them on our bodies. And we may notice kids getting too close, right? They might have a hard time with this idea of social distance, and they may be kind of defensive to, being touched in general. Okay. So again, just reflect on, is my child potentially showing behaviors? So when we talk about nourishing your child's sensory needs, we can talk about it from the perspective of a kiddo who is, presenting fairly typically. And we can also talk about it from the perspective of a child who might be presenting with a sensory processing disorder. So every child needs input into all of their senses throughout the day to help them maintain that regulation, to help them maintain sort of optimal functioning. We all do, not only kids, adults need it too. So nourish your own sensory, your own sensory systems as well, adults out there. But sensory processing disorder indicates kind of another level where we really need to scaffold and we really need to organize the amount and type of sensory input we're giving to the system. So really what we're talking about when we're talking about a sensory processing disorder is this neurological traffic jam, where all of the senses that we've talked about up to this point are not essentially running smoothly together. So I gave an example earlier of the vestibular system, right? When I turn my head and look at something, my vestibular system needs to be tracking the turn of my head, and my eyes need to focus on what I'm looking at, and maybe I'm even listening to something. So an example would be crossing the street. I need to be able to cross the street. I need to be able to look both ways without falling over, right? I need to be able to see the cars. I'm going to try to hear the cars. And as I'm walking, that proprioceptive information that I'm doing when I'm getting input into the bottoms of my feet, all of those things should be happening in smooth conjunction with one another. And in sensory processing disorder, that's not what's happening. So some part of that information that I just described in a crossing the street example is really confusing. It doesn't make sense to the body, and it can be really, really distressing for people that are experiencing it. All right, so we have some different types of sensory processing disorder, and we'll go through these a little bit briefly because we have lots more to talk about. So we'll touch on these, and then if we want more information, we can definitely send some resources. So we've touched on them a little bit with just talking about the sensory systems beforehand. So when we think about sensory modulation disorder, right, we've already talked about sensory over-responsivity, right, hyper-responsivity, and sensory responsivity or hypo-responsivity. And so those two things make up a modulation disorder. So if we're consistently over-responding to a certain type of input, or we're consistently under-responding to another type of input, you may be experiencing the sensory modulation disorder, trouble modulating the amount and type of input that your nervous system can handle at one time. Sensory discrimination is more this idea of this really comes down to that tactile, a lot of times the tactile sense, where we really have a difficult time discriminating between something that, might feel to one person sort of typical, right? So like, let's just take clothing, for example. So I'm wearing, this sweater, but this sweater has kind of like this crocheted, texture to it. And for me, it's totally fine. But for another person with all these kind of holes and bumps and lumps in this sweater, if I have a discrimination disorder, even though that shouldn't necessarily feel like noxious or difficult to tolerate, somebody with a sensory discrimination disorder really might have a hard time tolerating a texture like this on their skin. So that's an example of a discrimination disorder. And then a sensory motor disorder is what we see when we're thinking about those kids potentially who have like difficulty with proprioception, muscle tone issues like low tone and high tone that can contribute to difficulty with moving our body in a coordinated way. So we may have a postural disorder or a dyspraxia, meaning that planning and executing novel motor movements is really difficult. So those are the high points of the different types of sensory processing disorders. And then we've also listed here some red flags for SPD. And I don't necessarily have to read each of these slides because you're going to have the slides come to you. But what we want to think about is just, making good observations over the course of time for our kiddos. So, if you're concerned about anything that we've talked about in the past and you continually make observations, you might say, okay, I'm gonna, look at my child from the perspective of one of the senses, and I'm gonna ask myself some questions about, does my child consistently over-respond to things that they're touching, or do they under-respond to things that they're touching, right? So you want to make observations. And then for yourself here in the audience, maybe you've kind of had some of these thoughts or difficulties throughout your own life. You can use those red flags for yourself as an adult too, because there are all kinds of things as an adult that we might have trouble with. So we can use those red flags to help us identify those. So what we talked about just now, and this is always a great slide to look at, what you see on the surface is like that tip of the iceberg, right? You only see like 30% of, this idea of sensory processing on the top. That's easy to see. That's, kind of easy to observe. But then there are all these underlying processes that we talked about just now that really make up kind of the parts that you don't see. So what you're seeing, what's observable is that 30% up there at the top. And then everything that underlies, everything that's foundational is what you don't see, but what, kind of we just tried to describe with, giving you some more insight into those sensory systems. And now I'm going to hand it over to Vanessa. So thank you so much for letting me make that introduction to you of the sensory system and sensory processing and integration.
Hello, good afternoon po. Okay, thank you, Lani, for introducing sensory integration to and sensory processing disorders to our listener. So basically, just going back to the tip of the iceberg, no? What do you want your child to be able to do? Actually, it's all in this learning pyramid. We call it the learning pyramid. This is what you want to see. Like, at school, you want your child to be able to read, to write, to spell, to know about the numbers. You want your child to problem solve, do sequencing, be creative with their arts and crafts schoolwork at school. So yan yung gusto mo. But the thing is, sensory processing is foundational. Before talaga yung bata matuto dun sa nasa top ng pyramid, dapat ito muna. So, yung mga na-mention kanina ni Lani na tactile, vestibular, proprioceptive, sense of touch, seeing, hearing, smell, taste. So, dapat yan muna ma-integrate muna. Actually, yung sinabi kanina na-mention na reflex integration. So, actually, dito yon tumutulong siya sa foundational skills. So, you want the reflexes to be integrated to the system so that it will pave the way for improving all other skills na nandito sa learning pyramid. So, what does this tell us? Just to summarize lang din, no? Yung sensory input natin is necessary yan sa optimal brain function. We all need that sensory input for us to be function. And at certain times of the growth of a child, kailangan niya yung lahat ng nourishment na yon. Kaya nga sabi nga natin dito, nourishing your child's sensory needs. Kasi especially for the first 6 years ng buhay ng bata, kailangan niya man-nourish, kailangan niya ng stimulation. Now, if ganun din naman, kung may mga negative stimuli or negative stimuli na na-interpret yung kanyang body and yung kanyang brain at hindi niya na pa-process ng maayos, pwede rin siyang maka-stunt sa growth ng bata or maka-stunt sa development ng bata. Okay. So, anong gusto natin? Ang sinasabi lang natin dito, yung sensory integration, foundation siya for higher brain functions, which yun yung gusto nating makita. And yun yung lagi nating kino-complain na problema. So, ibig sabihin, as parents, emphasize ko ulit yung sinabi ni Lani kanina, kailangan i-observe mo ng maigi yung anak mo para matulungan ka ng occupational therapist. I-identify saan nagka-classify. Okay. So, bakit kailangan nating i-improve yung sensory processing ng bata? Because yung participation niya magiging problematic. Ano yung example? So, ito yung mga magiging problema. Ano ba yung mga example niya? For example, a child na kailangan gumawa ng cutting and pasting activity. Example, mosaic. Common ng mosaic sa preschool, right? Tapos, sensitive siya sa glue. So, kapag may glue yung kanyang fingertip, ang tendency niya, mag-wash na siya ng hands. So, sa tingin nyo, kailan pa siya matatapos ng cutting and pasting activity? Kumbaga, yung glue na yon na nag-stick sa kamay niya, ang feeling ng discomfort niya, it's exponential. For other people na walang sensory processing disorder, yung glue na yon, okay, may discomfort. Ang gagawin mo, pupunas mo sa damit mo or sa rag, or wala na. Alam mo naman na mag-wash ka later, so deadma ka na. Pero sila, parang ang tendency, kailangan, hugasan ko na ngayon kasi hindi ako makakilos or masyadong parang feeling ng ibang teacher or ibang parents, OA masyado, grabe makareact. It's not OA. It's just their system, it's just their sensory system reading that sensation in a parang uncomfortable or parang exponentially negative way na giving them reactions na hindi maganda. Okay, so for example, a child na nag-refuse magstay in line. Imagine, bakit siya ayaw magstay in line? Possible na may problema siya sa tactile system. Ayaw niya magpa-touch. So, wala lang. Ang nakikita natin is, ayaw niya mag-line up, magpupush siya ng classmate niya pag nasa line. Pero hindi natin alam na ano kaya yung reason? Bakit niya ginagawa yung ganung behavior? So, ang tendency natin is paparusahan, or hindi natin ipapasali dun sa activity na kailangan mag-line up, or hindi papapasukin agad ng classroom kasi hindi siya marunong mag-line up. So with that, pwedeng ma-miss ng bata yung important experiences na pwede siyang matuto. So when you see a behavior, it's not always about this child is misbehaving. Ito yung goal namin dito sa aming seminar na to, is that we don't readily accept a specific negative behavior as something na kasi negative or aggressive lang yung bata. It could be a problem in sensory processing. Okay? So yun. So imagine yung magiging deprivation ng bata if ever. Okay. So yun. So for this part 1, di ba sabi natin part 1, dito lang muna tayo magfo-focus. Ano yung pwede nyong magawa doon sa mga bata na meron kayong nakakitaan na parang symptoms or red flags na pumapasok dito sa ganitong klaseng classification. Okay. So, yan. So, unang-una, ang mapapansin nyo, pag nagpa-therapy kayo, unang sinasabi, okay, baguhin po natin yung schedule nyo. Magbibigay po kami ng tinatawag nating sensory diet. So, minsan, ano pa yan, marami pa silang issues dun sa term na yan. So, let's just use the term sensory enriched schedule. That's why your therapist will ask you to change your schedule, to modify your routine, change certain parts of your home, change the way you play with your child. It's because we have helped you identify yung specific sensory system na may problem and then give emphasis on that sensation na possible na kailangan ng anak po ninyo. Okay? So ito, strategy siya na individualized kasi depende po siya sa anak nyo. Ngayon, hindi po namin kayo matutulungan gumawa nito if hindi natin i-observe yung anak ninyo. So dapat as parents, observant kayo. If you can keep a journal of what your child is doing, kunwari may ganito siya mag-play, i-observe nyo, i-notes nyo po lahat ng nandoon. And then, isulat nyo ano yung nagiging reaction nila pag binigyan nyo ng mga things, kunwari binigyan nyo siya ng ganitong klaseng food, ano yung reaction niya? Ganitong klaseng clothing, anong reaction niya? Pag may loud sound, bigla, anong reaction niya? So, yon. So, very important po yung input nyo as parents so we can help you make this sensory enriched schedule. But you can attempt making your own. So ano po yung example niyan? Ano yung meron dyan? So basically, kahit hindi naman talaga ganito yung format, no? Pwede siya na more or less kailan yung time, ano yung key events ng araw, tapos ano yung mga sensory enriched na activities. So for example, from the time ng morning, mag-wake up siya. So ano ba usually yung nangyayari ano ba yung ginagawa nyo sa morning na pwede nating pasukan ng sensory enriched activity? So for example, your child is medyo sedentary, medyo nandun siya sa matagal mag-react, slow yung processing, slow yung response. Parang you have to call this child 10 times before siya mag-respond or none at all. So possible na pasok siya dun sa child na under-responsive. So anong gagawin natin? So we want to wake up yung kanyang sensory system. So during pag may time na mag-wake up, pwede tayo magbigay ng sensory activities doon sa time na yon. Or kunwari, during playtime, your child is very hyperactive. Inaakyat niya lahat ng furniture. Meron akong isang kid na remember ko sabi ng mommy, pupunta siya doon sa kanilang bodega, sa tindahan nila basically, tapos may mga tires doon, iaakyat siya doon, tapos magja-jump siya. And ang height nun is around 10 feet. Tapos wala lang dun sa bata, wala siyang sense of fear. And then gusto niya yung sensation na pag bumagsak siya sa floor, una yung knees. So what if no maaksidente, biglang pwede siyang ma-fracture, masyadong mataas ang 10 feet. For a child na nasa 3 to 4 feet lang ang height. So ganon. So pag playtime niya, ibabaguhin natin para mabigay natin yung sensations na kailangan ng katawan niya so that mas mag-improve yung kanyang processing or kanyang tinatawag nating modulation. So, ito po, itong profiles na to, yung different types of profiles na to, hindi talaga siya exact. Actually, this is just to give you an idea saan natin pwedeng i-classify yung anak ninyo. But these are not really, parang exact na, ay, anak ko ganito, so dito lang siya. So sometimes, over time, nag-change siya. So kunwari, at 3 years old, under-responsive siya. And then may time na pagdating niya ng 4, hala, nandito na siya sa kabilang profile. So, ano ba yung mga madalas nating makita? So, una-una yung under-responsive. So, ito yung mga bata na mag-move on na tayo. Okay. Ito yung mga bata na parang isipin niyo po itong water na to. Yan yung sensory stimulation. Yan yung gaano kadaming stimulation yung kailangan mo para ma-realize niya na puno na. So ito yung mga bata na they need more stimulation. So for example, under-responsive na bata. So ito yung sabi natin, 10 beses mong tatawagin yung pangalan bago siya mag-respond. Or kailangan may calling ng name, touching, and pulling. Bago niya ma-realize na, hala, may tumatawag pala ng attention ko. So kumbaga, punong-puno. Tapos hindi niya alam na nag-overflow na yung stimulation sa kanya or yung input sa kanya. And then, pwede siya na ganon, parang poor awareness, slow processing, or pwede din siya yung bata na dinidescribe kanina ni Lani na nagsiseek out ng input. So dahil feeling niya kulang, lagay pa rin siya ng lagay. So ang tendency niya, jump ng jump, malikot masyado, parang hindi napapagod, parang motor, ganon. Yung parang walang kapaguran na klase ng bata. So yan, possible na yung body niya, hindi niya napapansin or hindi niya nakikita na, enough na yung movement ko. So nagsisik pa siya ng nagsisik. So ano yung pwede nating, so yun, isipin niyo po yung mga anak niyo kung ganun po ba yung pinapakita nila. Now, ano yung pwede nating gawin? So ito yung mga pwede nating gawin. Okay. Pwede nating gawin na kung ang bata ay under-responsive or attention, nagsisik ng sensation. So, yan lang po yung rule, pero medyo rule of thumb, pero iba pa rin po if you observe them. So, for example po, if they need more stimulation, instead of sitting on a regular chair, when you do your homework at home, ngayon po, lalo na, di ba naka-home sessions po lahat ng schoolwork. So, it's just the parents assisting the child. It's not the teacher anymore. The teacher at school, di ba, very authoritative. Kayang-kaya nilang pasunurin yung anak nyo. Sa inyo nagtataka, paano po doon napapaupo ng teacher, ang likot-likot, nagpe-fidget, kasi nga nagsisik siya ng movement. You can actually change the chair into a vestibular ball po. Or alam niyo po exercise ball na makikita niyo sa gym na ginagamit ng mga nag-gym para mag-exercise. So yun po, pwede niyo po yun. Or yoga ball, yun yung tawag nila doon. Basta gym ball, yan. So instead na regular chair, you can ask them to sit down sa ganitong klaseng chair. Okay? Or, you can, okay, ayun pala, so mali. Doon tayo sa under-responsive na isang klase, yung parang slow yung processing. Kung doon sa hyperactive na bata, pwede mo siyang paupuin sa exercise ball. Yung bata na parang masyadong luray-luray or parang, parang laging inaantok, ganyan, or laging sedentary, pwede siya mag-sit sa ball kasi this can help this child become, parang give stimulation para mas mag-sit down siya properly. And then, pwede rin kayo magkaroon ng alerting snacks. So for example, yung mga crunchy food, yung mga sour na pagkain, medyo ingat lang sa salty food. Pero basically, para magising siya. Kumbaga sa layman's term, magising yung senses niya. Buhayin natin yung senses niya. Or mga cold na food. Spicy, choice niyo na po yan kung gusto niyo silang pahainin na spicy na food. The next is, pwede rin na you can use bright lights. Yan. Or then kung may trampoline kayo sa bahay, pwede rin. Pero kung wala kayong trampoline, pwede din kayo mag-set up ng swing, kahit made of blanket lang. Pwede nyo i-set up like sa ilalim ng table, pwede nyo i-set up yung swing doon kung maliit lang yung anak ninyo. Or kung merong any sturdy place sa house na pwede kayong maglagay ng swing made of blanket. So yon, fast swinging po, hindi yung slow na swinging, fast swinging. And then, pwede rin music or fast-paced music na loud. Or pwede, kung kunwari, young pa yung anak nyo, pwede naman na i-bounce-bounce nyo sa knees nyo. And then, try to establish eye contact. So, this is actually common din sa mga children na may autism po. Okay. So, yun. Parang, kumbaga, yung lethargic na bata, no? So, these are the other things that you can do for a lethargic child. So, pwede yung mga tinatawag nating mga gross motor break or mga takbo-takbo. Pwede rin kayong magpagawa ng parang obstacle course sa bahay made of parang mga chairs, mag-crawl siya doon, mag-jump siya from the chair. Pwede rin mag-step over mag-step over sa chair or mag-jump from the floor to chair. So pwede ganyan siya. So yung mga exercise, mga calisthenics, pwede niyong magamit. Okay? And then, ayan, yung mga swinging, jumping, climbing, playing. Actually, kunwari, meron kayong makita mga exercise videos for kids sa YouTube, you can actually encourage them to follow that. Pero, hindi pwede, parang hindi naman dapat sila yung magpa-follow lang sa palabas. So, pwede nyo silang samahan. Or pwede nyo pasamahan sa mga kapatid. Okay. So, yun. And then, yung isang type naman ng children na kailangan ng more sensation. Ito naman yung tinatawag nating seekers. So ito yung common. Mas na madalas ko itong makita sa mga nire-refer sa amin. So yung kids na very hyperactive pa. So sobrang active or yung touch ng things. So dapat po, pag observe niyo yung anak nyo, ano ba siya? More of move ng move? Or touch ng touch, or sometimes tasting everything. So, ganyan. So, ibig sabihin, pwedeng nagsisik siya ng sensation. So, dapat i-observe nyo, ano kaya yung gusto niya? Is it the sound? Is it the movement? Or is it the touch? Sometimes, yung child, maingay. Yung parang, mag-sound off lang siya. So, possible na sensation seeker siya. Pero, pwede rin na hindi siya sensation seeker. Pwedeng mag-fall dun sa isang type. So, pero anyways, so kung yung maingay, yung gusto niya loud yung music, gusto niya malakas full volume yung TV. So tingnan nyo. Or pwede rin na lahat tong tatlo sinisik ng anak ninyo. Pwede. So ano yung dapat nating gawin? So dapat yung since gusto niya ng more, it's like a child na thirsty. So kung gusto niya ng more water, kailangan nating ibigay yung opportunity to drink more water. But here, it's the sensation that kailangan ng bata. So kung gusto niya ng more movement, kailangan bigyan natin siya ng more opportunities for movement. Kung kailangan niya ng touch, more opportunities for touch. So example po, yung anak po ninyo, ang tendency niya is tinitaste niya lahat, tinatouch niya lahat basta like ganyan siya ng ganyan sa katawan nyo, or basta yung hindi talaga mapakali yung hands, always touching. So, with that observation, it is possible na yung anak nyo nagsisik ng touch sensation. So, anong pwede natin gawin? Pwede natin increase yung opportunity for touch during bathing. So, paano natin gagawin yan? For example, use loofah or more time for soaping. Diba? So, usually, diba, when you soap, tapos na yan in 3 minutes. Pero baka we can extend that for 5 minutes or 6 minutes. So, double yung time. And then you can teach your child how to use the loofah or the face towel or whatever you use para mag-soap siya ng body niya during bathing. Kasi, when we provide sensory input, it's not us providing. It should be the child na active participant. So, siya mismo yung gumagawa. So, you can actually use that opportunity na naliligo siya to provide more opportunities to touch yung body niya. Diba? So, by doing that, you're already giving the child the opportunity to have more touch sensations. Okay? So, yun. So, hindi po ito, don't get me wrong, hindi natin siya dinadivert Kasi minsan yun yung term na ginagamit ng parents, no? Hindi po natin dinadivert. Binibigyan natin, nag-create tayo ng opportunities para magbigay ng sensations na kailangan niya in an appropriate environment. So, di ba, okay lang naman po mag-touch ng body kapag naliligo. Di ba? O kaya pag grooming time, o kung gusto niya ng more touch, o di more time for combing hair. Ganyan. O pag eating time, maybe your child is 2 years old, let him eat with his hands muna. Like, for example, 3 times kayong kumakain. O di kung kailangan niya ng more touch sensation, yung 2 meals ninyo, pwede siya mag-eat with his hands, di ba? Ayun. O kunwari naman po, kung movement yung hinihingi ng anak ninyo, ito yung madalas no, na ginagawa ng mga therapists. O sige po, pwede tayong, binibigyan kayo ng instruction na, sige po, mag-obstacle course kayo every 2 hours. Hindi ko alam kung may mga naka-encounter na gano'n. Actually, in a ideal sensory integration na program, hindi sana gano'n. Kaya lang, yun lang din yung pwede nating magawa na pwedeng mag-move yung bata magbigay kayo ng opportunities for movement every 2 hours na para at least structured, hindi siya maglikot lang siya ng useless or aimless, di ba? And then involved kayo dun sa opportunity na yon na nagsisik siya ng movement. So for example, pwede kayo mag-tumble and play, or kung may kapatid siya, o sige, encourage yung parang wrestling, o di ba? Kasi gusto niya ng more movement, and possible din na kunwari gusto niya ng touch and more movement, more touch and more movement. So yung mga ganon, yung mga ganong laro po, makakatulong sa kanya. So basically po, ang aim nyo is mabigay nyo to dun sa mga daily activities niya. So usually sa children, during bathing, grooming, eating, and playing. Okay. Yun. So what else can you do para sa sensation seekers? Pwede errands. Kung gusto niya ng movement, okay, errands. Even helping you out getting the laundry from the second floor of your home, bring it down when it's laundry time. You can actually portion it na instead of, letting your child carry the whole basket, syempre that's too big, di ba? Pwede in batches. And by doing that, yung going up and down the stairs niya can actually provide the movement na kailangan niya. Walking the dog, di ba? So ito po, wala tayong playground equipment, not everybody has. Pero pinakamadaling i-improvise sa bahay is swing, just made of blanket, or you can make actually obstacle courses out of boxes. You can make crawling tunnel out of boxes ng ref or pinagdikit-dikit na boxes ng noodles. And actually, your child will enjoy it. You can even encourage them to create their own course, di ba? Ayan. So, yun po, na-mention ka na kanina, itong mga to. Ayan. Or kung may bookshop kayo sa bahay, naku, maganda yun, kalatin nyo, and then let them fix it, di ba? So, that will give them a lot of movement and a lot of sensations. Okay, the next type naman po, the next group is yung child na kahit konti pa lang yung sensation na binibigay mo, feeling nila punong-puno na. So, it's either overwhelmed child na parang tipong always upset, konting bagay lang, konting noise lang, sisigaw siya pabalik, or ma-upset siya, konting na touch lang, mag-ano na siya, parang feeling nyo OA na yung bata, no? Or yung bata na always nag-escape, ayaw niya, parang always siya in the defense mode. So, yan siya. Okay, so ano yung mag-iisipan niya if you have that child? Or yung bata na tinatawag nating, nagre-resist ng change. Yung tipong gusto niya yung routine niya same lang, tsaka same food lang all over. So, yon. So, pag ganyan, or fixated lang sa mga bagay-bagay. So, actually, yung fixations na yon helps them become more organized. Pwede kasi na-overwhelm siya dun sa environment niya. So, it's his way of tuning out yung excess na nakukuha niya sa environment. So, pwedeng gano'n. Kaya fixated siya mag-line up lang, or fixated siya mag-play lang ng mga bottles, or maggawa ng noise. Mag-create lang siya ng noise na pwede bothered siya with sound. So, ang gagawin niya, to counter that, mag-create siya ng sarili niyang sound. Ewan ko kung nakapansin kayo ng mga anak nyo, sama nyo sa mall, tapos maingay or they're shouting when they're inside the mall because pwede overwhelm siya sa noise ng mall, and then tendency niya is to counter that noise. So, I will shout, 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 ganun. Or magsising ng sobrang lakas. Yon. Okay. So, anong pwede niyong gawin? Okay, so you can limit stimulation. So, paano natin siya gagawin? Unang-una, para dun sa bata na ayaw mag-transition, yung sabihin na natin na gusto niya routinary lang lahat, gusto niya same clothes. Like I have one kid before, no, green lang yung gusto niyang isuot. To the point na lahat ng clothes niya na hindi green, sinisira niya or nilalagay niya sa washing machine kahit hindi pa nagamit. So, paano sa school? Ang school niya, every day, iba-iba yung uniform. So, di ba? So, paano yun? Okay. So, anong nangyayari? What can help this child? Pwede organizer. So, for children, hindi naman kailangan na parang organizer na listahan na parang sa adult. Pwede you have a big calendar with pictures na ano yung, kunwari, pag Monday, ganito yung color ng t-shirt, so that the child can anticipate ano yung expectation sa kanya. So, that's an example of a transition routine na meron siyang schedule. Or yung mga kids na ayaw magpa-cut ng nails. So, dun sa inyong monthly schedule na malaki, schedule niya, meron dun, may icon dun na mag-cut ng nail. Tapos every day before kayo matulog, tapos na yung day, pagkagising, okay, today is Tuesday. So, today, ano yung gagawin natin? So, dapat medyo structured yung place ninyo, and then may organizer. May yung parang, kumbaga sa atin diary natin of what to do. But ito for children. Okay. Tapos, yun, sa transition, for example, gusto niya lang mag-play for 1 hour blocks lang. Line up ng blocks, paano yan if it's time to eat na? So, unang-una talaga dapat, yung day mo, may routine kayo, may schedule kayo, and then it's visually represented. And then, when it's time, kunwari, matatapos na yung sinet mong time, 1 to 3 p.m., playtime. Tapos 3 p.m. dapat, for example, snack time na or eating time na. So dapat, 2:30 pa lang, may announcement ka na. Okay, in 30 minutes ha, we're going to eat snacks. You will have to pack away your toys in a while. And then you can already set a timer. Na yung timer na yon, pwede siya, depende kasi sa child, no, dahan-dahan. Some kids, na napapansin namin na kailangan mga 5 beses na alarm pa bago nila maintindihan na, it's time to play. So, ginagawa natin, binibigyan natin sila ng time. Okay, every 5 minutes, mag-a-alarm. Okay, 1, mag-alarm siya. And then, second 5 minutes, mag-alarm na naman siya. Okay, 2. And then, that means, pag nakarating na ng 5 na alarms, ibig sabihin, you really have to pack away. So, parang ganun. Kung piniprepare mo siya for the change, na aalisin mo siya dun sa pinaka-gusto niya na nilalaro. So, yun. Yun po. So, I hope that helped. Okay. So, and another, we can actually explore different transition routines for you. But generally, this will do the trick. There are times na sabihin, hindi naman siya effective pag once mo lang ginawa. Magka-cry, magka-tantrums. Pero sa start lang naman, once na nakita natin yung consistency with the transition routine that you're doing, he will get used to it. He will accept that transition at mas masasanay siya. At hindi kayo magpipilitan. Kasi di ba, like, pang 10 beses mo nang sinabi, ayaw niya talaga mag-transition from the playing of the favorite whatever, train ba yan, blocks ba yan? Okay. So, what else can you do? Yeah.
Hey, Vanessa, just was going to let you know, I think we're at the top of the hour now. So if you want to,
yes.
and then we have a couple of questions that I think.
Okay. So, what else can you do, no? Kabaliktaran naman, you can do firm massage. Any massage, your therapist can teach you, or any massage na makikita nyo, but as long as it's firm towards the body, and then low-level lighting, and then maybe you can use slow music, rocking chair, slow swing, and yun pala, yung dark room. Sometimes, I don't know if you notice, your therapist will work in a dark room. It's not a punishment to your child. It's highly likely that your child is overstimulated or yung kanyang profile is Nandun siya sa very, kumbaga, sensitive to stimuli. So we're trying to, kumbaga, subtract or parang eliminate the other stimuli so that we can help your child focus. But it doesn't work for all children. So it depends kung pwede siya sa anak ninyo. Okay? Yeah. So ayan, so you can do calming activities, lalo na pag napansin nyo na parang masyado na silang agitated. Ayan, so you can do that. Okay. And then, okay. So yun. So in summary, in sensory processing, it's important na merong active participation. Whatever you give to the child, meron silang participation dapat. Sila dapat yung gagawa. You can offer, you can give them choices, but sila sana yung active participant. And then it should be fun and meaningful. And pinaka-importante lang po na kailangan yung makuha from today is that you observe your child first. Okay? You write them down and you can ask us using those information na na-observe nyo sa child nyo. Hindi po masyadong useful yung malikot lang yung anak ko, hyper lang yung anak ko. You have to describe when they are showing that and their reactions to your response to them so that we can help you better. Okay? So I think that's the wrap. Hopefully, you learned a lot. So we're ready for questions, Lani.
Yeah, we'll open it up for questions and people can add more in the chat. But one of the questions that we have here is, what if your child does not let you comb their hair, or they don't like for you to comb their hair? How do you handle that sensation?
Okay, first is that we have to respect that this child doesn't want us to comb their hair. I'm sorry, how old? I hope I know the age of the child. First is we don't force them because it's obvious that that child is sensitive to tactile stimuli. So we will not go ready to providing combing ng hair. So maybe we can do a lot of crawling activities first sa tunnel na may mga iba't ibang textures, or we can do, alam niyo yung mga sand play na they can play with sand with their hands, walk in the sand, walk in the grass, yung mga ganun lang muna. And then with the comb, syempre dapat we introduce the comb sa kanya as something na hindi siya fearful na object. So you let them play with the comb. So, in terms of sensory perspective, ang gagawin natin, hindi muna natin siya pipilitin mag-comb ng hair. Hayaan mo lang muna na medyo magulo yung buhok niya. Pero ang importante, magbigay ka muna ng more tactile enriching activities muna sa kanya. So, more of expose muna siya sa different types of textures and maybe play with it sa head niya, sa hands niya. Kung di pa siya ready sa face, sa head, okay lang sa hands and feet, and then eventually sa body, and then sa face, and then sa head. And then, behavioral-wise, that comb na para sa kanya, let him play with it so that he knows na it is something na safe and useful. And you can always show him na you're also using that comb, or you have a comb on na you're using, and then maybe encourage your child na siya din gumaya sa'yo. And then eventually, that child will try to initiate. Do you have any more, Lani, to add to that?
No, I think that's great because I think we can actually add to that with a picky eater question. We've had a couple of them. Being that if you have a picky eater, then, you know, what Van just said about having a kiddo who's hyper responsive to hair combing, picky eaters are generally hyper responsive to textures that are in their mouths. And so, you know, something that Vanessa just mentioned that's really important is to allow for, you know, new foods to be presented even just on the table. So the child starts tolerating the food just looking at it, right? Before you even touch it, before you even put it in your mouth. And then thinking about, allowing for play, even though we, are all taught, we don't play with our food. Well, for kids who are really picky eaters, we need that. We need to allow for some exploration with maybe fingers, with maybe, putting it near their mouth, but not in their mouth. So, I would just add on to, anytime you have a kiddo who's having a hard time tolerating a tactile experience, whether it's hair combing, picky eating, that you really need to allow for the exploration like Vanessa just mentioned. Van, how about this question? Why would hyposensitivity in the vestibular system include visual? So how are the vestibular system and the visual system linked is, I think, the question there.
That's usually seen in children they have problems in vestibular system and that are sedentary. So usually the under-responsive type to vestibular system, or seeker, basically. The thing is, that's why they have this vestibular stimulation, is that possibly this child cannot move or cannot create movement on their own. So their tendency is to create that movement using visual. So for example, when you jump, when you jump, you see your environment moving up and down. What if this child cannot jump? So the tendency of this child will move this hand up and down. So to give that sensation that he's moving up and down, just like jumping, that's why there is this visual stim. So it's usually, that's the reason. There could be other reasons also, but in general, that the kids that I've seen, that's the reason. They don't have the motor skills to move and nourish or get that nourishment that they need through movement. So they create it through visual stimuli. I don't know, do you have something to add, Lani?
Yeah, I would just add that the visual, vestibular, and auditory pathways are essentially a triad, right? So first of all, they're very closely anatomically linked. And one system really informs another system in this kind of triad. So it's, they're all so closely linked that, if there's a dysfunction in one of those systems, the other are going to essentially pick up where they left off. And we might have a child who just becomes overly dependent on a visual input versus being able to rely on that vestibular system.
So any more questions? I hope we answered your question. Oh,
Yeah,
in terms of
Van, go ahead.
Sorry.
I was going to say, we do have more coming in through the Q&A. And so one quick question, and then I'll get to other ones, because I think this one you guys could answer pretty quickly. But as you talked about, Van, in talking about playing with the glue, right? She says, I am curious about your example regarding playing with the glue. Does implementing messy play, would it help or will work with him? So if you have a child who does not like to play things that are messy, and you were saying play with glue on his hands, does this implementing a messy play, would it work?
No, no.
Or more things with messy play, I think is what she's trying to say.
Yeah. No, if the child is too sensitive with glue, you don't readily go to messy play. Like the usual things that when you Google messy play, it's really messy. No, so again, starting from what can the child tolerate. So the parent should identify first what type of textures his child can tolerate. For example, if your child cannot tolerate glue, so what are the other things? Maybe felt paper, folded paper. Maybe this child can tolerate these things, and then start messy play with those things, but not with the textures that this child is not comfortable with. And then from there, you can start introducing other textures in a play environment, maybe sand, if the child is ready. And then maybe after that is the sand is something intermediate. You can also do play in the mud if the child is ready, or you can create a mud like dry Milo, plugging Milo and water, mix it with hands. If the child can tolerate that, then that's they can play with that, and then proceed to the glue. Play messy with the glue, put colors in the glue, something like that. So do you have any more ideas, Lani?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Sometimes something that's fun to do is if you're starting to bridge from a dry texture to a wet texture, or like something a little bit more squishy, you can put whatever your squishy texture is in like a protective layer. So you can put it like under a piece of plastic wrap so that you can start getting the squishy, but you don't get so much of the sticky yet. So you know what Van and I are talking about with all of these examples of the hair combing, of the picky eating, of the messy play, is to really scaffold it and start where your child is able to tolerate, right? You don't want to go meet your child where they are right now without providing a challenge that feels totally unapproachable to the child. So yeah.
Yeah. One of the other questions we have here, is it okay to eliminate things like a face towel to your child because he is always smelling it and doesn't allow us to touch it? Sometimes it's just disturbing during an activity. So it sounds like it's a child who, gets a lot of sensory from having a face towel and constantly smelling it.
Okay.
And is the parent asking if it's okay to remove it?
Yeah, is it okay to eliminate things like a face towel when he's always wanting to smell it, is kind of how I'm reading that.
Okay, so can I start? First thing is that he's getting a lot of sensation. So we can actually put that in a schedule, like before any sit down activities, you let him. But para make it to a point that it's a rule that during maybe one worksheet, you have to finish it first before we give you the towel. But don't get me wrong, it's not making it as a reward. It's just putting it in a perspective. So there is a time for you to play with your towel, smelling it, and there is a time for you to work. Now, we have to be careful with that recommendation. If your child is already stressing out, or you think this child cannot focus anymore, maybe your child needs a break with that towel. So for example, it's a 5-item worksheet. Maybe after 2 items, you think that you observe that your child is being agitated already, cannot focus. That towel can actually help your child refocus by giving him a break with that towel. So I don't know, Lani, if you would agree, but that's how will I start with this child, and maybe eventually not really remove it, because he needs, I think he needs the sensation. So he needs that.
I agree. And I think what Vanessa is suggesting is a nice behavioral scaffold, right? So there's another question that came in that we can kind of use as an example to tie back to the towel question, which is, observing a child who uses his voice in kind of protest when not wanting to do a preferred task or a non-preferred task. So how do we help a child who cries or screams at the top of his lungs to participate? And it's, it's a bit of a behavioral answer. And I think Vanessa was giving a really nice behavioral scaffold to the towel problem, being that, you can do a first then, right? You can say, first, we're going to do 2 questions on your worksheet, then you can have a break with your towel, right? And for a child who in this second question is using their voice to, strongly protest participating in a non-preferred activity, we can use a similar strategy. So we can use a visual first, then, right? So we might have something that the child needs to complete that they don't want to complete, but if they can anticipate a preferred task afterward, or a break with a preferred sensory input after they complete the non-preferred task, that can really give the child a sense of predictability and be able to participate in whatever you're asking them to focus on.
And maybe can I add this child with this child, getting sensation from the towel. I'm sure there are other behaviors that will help us identify which system is the child having needing more sensation, and maybe we can use that to prepare his brain for a sit down activity. So because if you just give us like that there's a towel issue, maybe that's just like one part of the problem. But if we're given like maybe 3 minutes of video to observe your child, that we can help you identify which system is problematic and what kind of sensation your child needs better. And then we can add and emphasize that sensory input to his daily routine so that we can help lessen the maybe the fixation with the towel, or you know.
Yeah.
Yep.
So feel free to, reach out to Teacher Van through Theracare's or through Fenixia and send us the video, and Lonnie and or Van would be more than willing to help you with that if you want to give more detail and even share a video with us. And then I think we'll take one last question, and then we have a couple other ones that are here, but if we didn't get to your question, we will definitely get back to you in answering the questions that we weren't able to get to. So the other one is, what would be a possible thing to do when a child is doing self-hitting or hitting others, and how do we address that problem? Which is a bigger kind of thing, but I think it's, again, sometimes that can be, the self-injury can be sensory seeking.
Yep, absolutely. So if you have a child who is using a method of unexpected behavior, but you notice that it always tends to be maybe hitting or pushing, you may suspect the proprioceptive system as one of the systems that needs more input. So in order to maybe minimize hitting self or hitting others, pushing self or pushing others, you may try providing some of the proprioceptive inputs that we spoke about. So those are the heavy work: pushing, pulling, carrying, maybe using weight or using a weighted vest to help to control some of that, or to give some regulation to the proprioceptive system. Now, that said, this behavior may be something else entirely, since we haven't observed your child. And if it's a behavior that needs a more, again, maybe less of a sensory approach and more of a behavioral approach, there are ways to support, giving a child a different choice, a safer choice to use. Van, do you want to add?
Yeah, after the observation, maybe we can give fidget toy, but the fidget toy should be fit for your child. Not everything in the internet is a good fidget toy for your child. Some families, they already bought everything, but it doesn't work for your child. So we can actually help you search for that fidget toy that will help your child at least minimize that hitting self.
Yeah, and as a parent, I loved that, because I've experienced this before, and sometimes it's also that they're not actually, it's that they're not feeling well, and they may not have the communication to be able to actually tell you what's wrong. And so sometimes the self-hitting could be that they're trying to also communicate with you. So you kind of have to, depending upon, obviously we don't know enough about your child, but I have personally experienced, because I have a child who doesn't have words to be able to communicate, that we have found when he was doing self-hitting that he could actually be having a headache, or he's not feeling well, or if he's, coming after you, he's trying to communicate something. And so, you want to really pay attention to those type of behaviors to see, is it sensory seeking? Is it communication? Or is it seeking attention for behavioral issues? So it's kind of a loaded question, but I think it's nice that we are able to kind of address it broadly for folks.
Oh yes, I'd like to add to that. I experienced one child na he has a problem sa kanyang teeth, and he cannot communicate na painful yung teeth niya. All he can say is paracetamol. When he wants paracetamol, it's pain, just to relieve pain. And then after a while, the hitting of the head gone really bad. And then one time he was hospitalized. Then the doctor said he needs surgery. So that's the only time we realized that it was pain that he's communicating to us, that hitting of head. So
So I believe that's a wrap.